Here's what nobody tells you about replacing a legend: you inherit their ghosts too. I'm Ryan Cooper, 45, been doing close protection for 20 years, and I thought I'd seen everything until I took David Silva's spot at Sentinel Security. Marcus was my first partner, taught me how to read a room, how to position myself so I could see all the exits, how to keep a client alive when the world wanted them dead. When Director Harrison called saying Marcus had retired, and they needed someone with my experience, I should have known something was wrong. The money was too good, triple my usual rate for what Harrison described as standard executive protection. But Marcus had always talked about retiring to that cabin in Montana, fishing every day, so I figured he'd finally done it. I moved into his apartment. Company housing, they said, came with the position. That's when I found the first thing that didn't make sense: his lucky coin, the one he'd carried through 3 tours in Afghanistan, sitting on the kitchen counter like he just set it down. Marcus would never leave without that coin. I tell myself I'm being paranoid, but 20 years in this business teaches you that paranoia keeps you breathing. The apartment still smells like his cologne, and there's a half-finished crossword puzzle on the nightstand dated 3 weeks ago. Harrison said Marcus left suddenly, but everything here suggests he expected to come back. I'm starting to think maybe he can't. Looking back, those first 2 weeks felt like putting on someone else's clothes. Everything almost fit, but not quite right. The agency briefed me on my new client, Alexei Petrov, Russian businessman with interests in shipping and real estate. Standard stuff: morning jogs, business meetings, occasional social events. Nina Torres, my handler, seemed nervous during the handoff, kept checking her phone and avoiding eye contact. She'd worked with Marcus for 3 years. He was good at the job, she said when I asked about him. Maybe too good. The routine settled in quickly. Kozlov was polite, professional, spoke perfect English with just a hint of accent. He liked his morning coffee black, always sat facing the door in restaurants, tipped well. Normal executive behavior. His meetings were in glass-walled conference rooms downtown, nothing suspicious. I positioned myself where I could watch entrances, scanned faces, checked routes. Textbook close protection. But there were odd moments. Kozlov would sometimes stare at me during quiet periods, like he was measuring something. Once, he asked if I'd worked with Marcus before. When I said yes, he nodded slowly and muttered something in Russian that sounded pleased. Elena started calling more frequently, asking detailed questions about our schedules, our routes, how Kozlov seemed to be adjusting to me. The apartment still bothered me. I'd found Marcus's backup weapon in a locked drawer, a .38 he'd carried for 15 years. Who retires and leaves their backup gun behind? I started sleeping with it under my pillow, though I couldn't explain why. Everything seemed normal on the surface, but normal in this business usually means you're missing something important. The first crack in my reality came on a Tuesday morning in October. Kozlov had a breakfast meeting at the Meridian Hotel with a man I'd never seen before, thin, nervous, kept checking his watch. They spoke in low voices over Eggs Benedict while I maintained position near the bar, watching approaches. Standard setup, except something felt rehearsed about their conversation, like actors running through familiar lines. 20 minutes in, Kozlov excused himself to the restroom. I followed protocol, sweeping the path and posting outside. That's when I heard him on his phone, speaking rapid Russian. My language skills are basic, but I caught enough, ready, as planned, and most chilling, he doesn't know. When he came out, his demeanor had shifted, more focused, predatory. Back at the table, the nervous man was gone. Just vanished, leaving his food half-eaten and a small envelope beside his plate. Kozlov pocketed it smoothly, paid the check, and we left. I asked about the man's sudden departure. Business emergency, Kozlov said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. These things happen. That afternoon, Elena called for our weekly check-in. She asked specific questions. Had there been any unusual meetings? Any deviations from routine? Had Kozlov seemed stressed or different in any way? I told her about the breakfast meeting, and there was a long pause on her end. Jake, she said finally, I need you to be very careful. And I need you to trust the process, even when things don't make complete sense. The way she said it made my skin crawl. Marcus had taught me to trust my instincts, and every instinct I had was screaming that something was fundamentally wrong. That night, I searched through more of his belongings, looking for anything that might explain his sudden departure. Hidden in a hollowed-out book, I found a USB drive labeled insurance. My hand shook as I plugged it into my laptop. The USB drive contained encrypted files I couldn't open and a single text document. Jake, if reading this, I'm gone. Not retired. Gone. Trust no one at Sentinel. Kozlov isn't client, he's target. They're using you. I stared at those words for an hour, trying to make them mean something else. Marcus was paranoid sometimes, saw conspiracies where there were just coincidences. Maybe he'd gotten spooked by something minor and overreacted. Maybe this was some kind of test, or a sick joke. I almost deleted the file 3 times, but couldn't bring myself to do it. The next morning, I called Elena. My voice sounded normal when I asked about Marcus's departure again, fishing for inconsistencies in the story. She stuck to the same script: sudden retirement, cabin in Montana, left no forwarding information. But when I mentioned finding some of his personal items, she got quiet. What kind of items? She asked. Just stuff. Crossword puzzle, that coin he always carried. I didn't mention the USB drive. Jake, you need to understand something. Marcus had been acting erratically toward the end. Making wild accusations, questioning orders, seeing threats that weren't there. We tried to help him, but he refused counseling. His departure was mutual. The gaslighting was subtle but unmistakable. I'd seen Marcus just 6 months before taking this job. He'd been sharp, focused, told me about some concerns with agency protocols, but nothing that seemed erratic. Elena was painting him as unstable, unreliable. The same way they'd probably paint me if I started asking too many questions. That afternoon, Kozlov had another meeting, this time with a woman who looked terrified. Same pattern, envelope exchanged, person disappeared. When I mentioned it casually, Kozlov laughed. You worry too much, Jake. These are just nervous investors. They prefer discretion. But I caught him watching me in the reflection of windows, studying my reactions. By November, the pattern was undeniable. Every week brought new meetings, with people who looked desperate, scared, or broken. They'd arrive alone, exchange envelopes with Kozlov, and leave looking worse, if they left at all. Some I never saw exit the buildings. When I asked about them, I got variations of the same response. Private matters, Jake. Confidential business. I started keeping a log, noting dates, times, descriptions. Professional habit, I told myself, but really I was building evidence for something I didn't want to believe. The people meeting with Kozlov had a common thread: they looked like they owed something. Money, maybe, or worse. Their body language screamed coercion, not voluntary business transactions. The USB drive haunted me. I'd bought encryption software to try cracking Marcus's files, spending nights hunched over my laptop while the pieces clicked together. Marcus had been investigating something, gathering proof. The timing of his retirement made sense now. He'd gotten too close to the truth. Elena's check-ins became more frequent, more invasive. She wanted to know everything: Kozlov's mood, his phone calls, whether he'd mentioned any concerns about security. Once she asked if I'd found anything unusual in Marcus's apartment. I lied smoothly, but her question confirmed my fears. They knew he'd left something behind. The breaking point came during what should have been a routine restaurant meeting. Kozlov was meeting with a young man, maybe 25, who kept crying and speaking in broken English about his family. I couldn't make out all the words from my position, but I heard "please" and "children" repeatedly. The envelope exchange happened as usual, but this time Kozlov made a phone call afterward. 5 minutes later, 2 men in expensive suits entered the restaurant. They didn't sit down. They walked directly to our table, flanked the crying man, and escorted him out. He looked back once, terror in his eyes, mouthing, "Help me," in my direction. Kozlov watched this happen while sipping his wine, completely calm. When I asked what just happened, he looked at me with those dead, measuring eyes. Sometimes people need encouragement to honor their commitments, Jake. You understand. That night, I broke into Marcus's encrypted files. Took me 8 hours and half a bottle of whiskey, but desperation makes you resourceful. What I found made me physically sick. Financial records, photographs, audio recordings, a complete dossier on a loan sharking operation using Sentinel security as a front. Kozlov wasn't a client being protected, he was a predator being enabled. The files detailed everything: how bodyguards were used to intimidate debtors, how meetings were actually collection visits, how people who couldn't pay were disappeared. There were photos of Marcus in the background of these operations, his face showing increasing disgust and horror as he realized what he'd become part of. The final entry, dated 3 days before his supposed retirement, was a single sentence. "They know I know. Getting out tonight." But he hadn't gotten out. I found video files on the drive, security footage from the parking garage of our building. Marcus entering alone at 11:47 p.m., then 4 men in tactical gear following at 11:52. The timestamp showed Marcus never left. The next morning, Elena announced his retirement. My hands were shaking when I called the one person I thought I could trust, my old sergeant from Afghanistan, Tommy Rodriguez, now a federal investigator. I told him everything, sent him copies of Marcus's files. He listened without interrupting, then gave me advice that changed everything. "Jake, you're not just a witness anymore. You're an accessory. Every day you work for them, every meeting you facilitate, you're complicit in whatever happens to those people. You want to honor Marcus's memory? You want to sleep at night? You get out now, or you become part of it." The next morning, Kozlov had another meeting scheduled. A middle-aged woman with children's photos clutched in her hands, tears streaming down her face. She looked exactly like my sister had 20 years ago, when her husband was dying and the medical bills were crushing our family. I knew what was going to happen to her, and I knew I couldn't watch it again. When Kozlov excused himself to make his usual phone call, I made my choice. I leaned across the table and whispered to the woman, "Run. Right now. Don't go home, don't pack, just run." She looked at me like I was insane, but something in my voice must have convinced her. She grabbed her purse and photos and bolted for the exit. I watched her disappear into the street crowd, knowing I'd just signed both our death warrants. Kozlov returned from his call to find an empty chair. His face went through several expressions: confusion, anger, then that cold calculation I'd learned to fear. He looked at me for a long moment, then smiled. "Jake, where did my guest go?" "Emergency call. Family situation. She had to leave immediately." He nodded slowly, but I could see him processing, weighing possibilities. When the 2 men in suits arrived 5 minutes later to an empty restaurant booth, Kozlov's smile disappeared entirely. He made another phone call, this one in rapid Russian. The only word I caught was problem. That afternoon, Elena called. No pleasantries this time. "We need to talk. In person. Now." I met her at a coffee shop downtown, every instinct screaming that this was a trap. She looked tired, scared, older than her 30-something years. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "They know, Jake. About the woman, about you warning her. They know." "Good. Maybe it's time everyone knew. You don't understand. This isn't just about money or debt collection. These people, they have connections everywhere. Police, federal agencies, judges. Marcus thought he could expose them too." The implication hit me like a physical blow. "He's not in Montana, is he?" Elena's eyes filled with tears. "He's alive, Jake. But barely. They're keeping him as insurance, in case any of his information surfaces. If you push this, if you try to be a hero like he did, they'll kill him. And then they'll kill you." She slid a plane ticket across the table. "Take this. Fly to Seattle tonight. Disappear for a while. Let this blow over." I stared at the ticket, knowing it was my last chance at a normal life. Then I thought about Marcus, about the crying man in the restaurant, about the woman with her children's photos. Some lines you can't uncross. "Where are they keeping him?" Elena's face went white. "Jake, don't even think about it. They have him in a facility upstate, heavily guarded. It's suicide." But I was already thinking tactically, the way Marcus had taught me. "How many guards? What kind of facility? I won't be part of this. You'll get us all killed." She stood to leave, then turned back. "He's at a private medical facility in Millbrook, about 2 hours north. They tell people he's there for psychiatric evaluation after a breakdown. But Jake, there are at least 6 men there, all armed, all professional. You can't. Can you get me building schematics? Security schedules?" She stared at me for a long moment, then sat back down. "You're really going to do this, aren't you? Even knowing it's hopeless?" "Marcus came for me once. Afghanistan, 2009. Taliban had me for 3 days before he found me. He didn't calculate the odds then, just came." I met her eyes. "I won't leave him." That night, I prepared like I was going to war. Which, in a way, I was. I loaded Marcus's .38 and my service pistol, studied the facility layout Elena had reluctantly provided, and planned 3 different escape routes. I knew I probably wouldn't survive, but survival wasn't the point anymore. The drive to Millbrook took me through dark country roads, giving me time to think about how everything had gone wrong. 6 months ago, I'd been a legitimate bodyguard protecting legitimate clients. Now I was planning an armed assault on a private facility to rescue my mentor from people who used loan sharking as cover for human trafficking. The American dream, right there. At 3 a.m., I parked half a mile from the facility and approached on foot through the woods. The building looked exactly like Elena's schematics. 2 stories, limited exits, guards posted at intervals that suggested they weren't expecting trouble but were prepared for it. Through a second-floor window, I caught a glimpse of someone in a wheelchair, head down, but with Marcus's distinctive gray hair. The sight of him like that, broken, defeated, filled me with a rage I hadn't felt since combat. These people had taken the best man I knew and turned him into a cautionary tale. They tried to do the same to me, and would keep doing it to others until someone stopped them. I checked my weapons one final time and moved toward the building. Getting inside was easier than it should have been. These guys were used to keeping people in, not keeping people out. I disabled the perimeter alarm, slipped past 2 guards having a smoke break, and found a service entrance that Elena's schematic showed led directly to the stairwell. The hallway on the 2nd floor was dimly lit, institutional green walls that reminded me of every government building I'd ever hated. Marcus was in room 237, according to the chart I'd glimpsed at the nurse's station. The guard outside his door was reading a magazine, confident and bored. I approached from behind, put him in a sleeper hold Marcus had taught me 15 years ago. He went down quietly. Inside the room, I found my worst fears confirmed. Marcus was conscious but barely recognizable. Thin, bruised, his left arm in a cast that looked weeks old. When he saw me, his eyes filled with tears, relief, fear, something I couldn't identify. "Jake," he whispered. "You shouldn't be here. They'll kill you." "They'll try." I started unlocking his restraints. "Can you walk?" "I think so. But Jake, there's something you need to know. They didn't just take me because of what I discovered. They took me because..." He grabbed my arm. "You were always the real target. The whole thing, Kozlov, the assignment, replacing me, it was all designed to get you involved. They need someone with your military background for something big." The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. My specialized training, my security clearances that were still active, my psychological profile that showed loyalty to partners above everything else. They hadn't just recruited me, they'd orchestrated my entire involvement. What do they want me to do? Political assassination. Someone high up, federal level. They need it to look like a security failure, not murder. You're the perfect fall guy, former military, personal connection to the target through previous protection work, and now a documented history of erratic behavior after your mentor's disappearance. The sound of running footsteps in the hallway cut our conversation short. Alarms started blaring. Someone had found the unconscious guard. Marcus struggled to his feet. "There's a service elevator at the end of the hall. It goes to the basement parking garage. Can you make it? With your help." He gripped my shoulder. "Jake, whatever happens, don't let them use you. Don't become what they tried to make me." We made it halfway down the hall before the shooting started. We almost made it. The service elevator was 20 feet away when the tactical team rounded the corner. I pushed Marcus behind a medical cart and returned fire, but we were outgunned and trapped. A lucky shot shattered the overhead light, plunging the hallway into darkness. In the chaos, I heard Marcus grunt in pain. He'd been hit. "Go!" he shouted. "Leave me!" But I couldn't. Not again. I dragged him toward the elevator, both of us bleeding, bullets chipping concrete around us. The elevator doors opened just as a flash bang went off, temporarily blinding everyone. We tumbled inside, and I frantically hit the basement button as automatic fire raked the closing doors. Marcus was unconscious by the time we reached the parking garage. I carried him to a stolen car, drove like hell through back roads, and got us to the emergency room of a hospital 2 counties away. I told them we'd been in a car accident, left him with the doctors, and disappeared before anyone could ask questions. That was 6 months ago. Marcus survived, but he's not the same man. The trauma, the drugs they gave him, the weeks of captivity, it broke something fundamental. He lives in a secure facility now, legitimate this time, getting the help he needs. Sometimes he recognizes me when I visit. Sometimes he doesn't. The federal investigation my friend Tommy started went nowhere. Kozlov disappeared. Elena was found dead in her apartment, apparent suicide. Director Harrison retired suddenly to a non-extradition country. Sentinel Security was quietly dissolved, its files shredded, its employees scattered to other agencies. The loan sharking operation continues under different management. I tried going back to regular security work, but I can't anymore. Every client looks like a potential threat, every routine assignment feels like a setup. I jump at shadows, check my car for bombs, vary my routes home. The paranoia Marcus warned me about has become my constant companion. Last week, I got a job offer. High-paying executive protection, legitimate company, excellent references. The client is a federal judge who's been receiving death threats. It's exactly the kind of assignment I used to excel at, exactly what I need to rebuild my career. But I can't shake the feeling that it's happening again. That somewhere, someone is moving pieces on a board I can't see. And this judge isn't the client, he's the target. And I'm still the weapon they're trying to aim. I took the job. Of course I did. What choice did I have? Rent doesn't pay itself, and there are only so many night security gigs at warehouses before you start eating cat food. Federal Judge Patricia Morrison, 58, appointed by the previous administration, currently presiding over several high-profile corruption cases. The threats against her seem real enough, specific dates, methods, inside knowledge of her schedule. But as I write this, sitting in my car outside her courthouse at 2 a.m., I can't stop thinking about how perfectly this all fits together. How the timing coincides with the end of several major trials. How the threatening letters use language patterns similar to what I saw in Marcus's files. How my new handler, a smooth-talking man named Davis, asked the same kinds of probing questions Elena used to ask. Judge Morrison reminds me of my mother. Same steel gray hair, same no-nonsense attitude, same way of looking at you like she can see straight through your bullshit. She's spent 30 years fighting corruption, putting away politicians and businessmen who thought they were untouchable. Next week, she's supposed to sentence the head of a major construction union with ties to organized crime. The threat assessment says the danger will peak during the sentencing. They've assigned me to be right next to her on the bench, close enough to react instantly to any threat. Close enough to put a bullet in her head and make it look like I was trying to save her. I should run. Take Marcus's advice from all those months ago and just disappear. But if I run, they'll find someone else to manipulate, someone else to turn into a weapon. And Judge Morrison will still die, just by different hands. So I sit here in the dark, cleaning my gun and trying to figure out which choice leads to the least blood. Trying to decide if I'm paranoid or if I'm finally seeing clearly. Wondering if there's a difference anymore. Tomorrow, I'll walk into that courtroom and take my position next to a woman who spent her life fighting the kind of people who destroyed Marcus, who tried to destroy me. And I'll wait to see who draws first, them or me. I still check the backseat every time I get in my car, but lately I've been wondering, what if the real threat was never behind me? What if it's been sitting in the driver's seat all along?